Reserve Bank today to increase interest rates. We're now looking at the repo rate, the rate at which it lends to commercial banks, 6.75%, and we're up 50 basis points. Prime, therefore, above 10%, 10.25%. Now, what's reacting positively is the rand. It's strengthened on the news. Last I looked, 16.25 against the dollar. Before this interest rate decision, it was at about 16.35 against the dollar. So let me come to my guest now, Owen Nkomo from Inkunzi Wealth, Sizwe Nxedlana from FNB. Sizwe, let's start with you. It was interesting what he said about the rand. Firstly, we can see how quickly it's deteriorating, down 13% against the dollar since the last MPC meeting. And I like the way he spoke about the removal of Nhlanhla. He didn't say it blatantly, but he said he acknowledged domestic factors affecting the rand even before the Fed started raising its interest rates. The worst performing currency, he acknowledged that against all these other emerging markets that are suffering. Do we have a trust problem that's really hitting home at the moment?
Well, I think the way we were viewed before the removal of Finance Minister Nene was as one of the fragile five, a small open economy that exports commodities with large twin deficits. However, the rating agencies and the financial markets gave us the benefit of the doubt relative to some of our constrained peers. And the reason for that was that we'd had 20 years in which we'd built up a relationship of very prudent and world-class fiscal and monetary policy. That reputation suffered a bit in December. I think that's manifest in the fact that the cost of government borrowing is increased by almost 120 odd basis points if you compare now and then. If you look at our credit default swaps, which is the cost of insuring against our debts, that's also increased quite significantly. So I think the powers that be did the right things by reversing the decision, but we are ever so slightly less trustworthy in the eyes of foreigners than we were before the fact. And so that's also reflected in the significantly weaker exchange rate. But I think going forward, to the extent that the SARB does the right things and the Treasury does the right things, and we see overall fiscal and monetary policy moving us back in the right direction, we may start to recover some of that.
Owen?
So look, I think you mentioned before we went for the break, the issue of the currency and where you think it will be at the end of the year. I think neither me or Sizwe can tell you the truth about that. We can only make educated guesses. But I think that what's happening with global markets right now is very strange. If you think about the international space where we've had quantitative easing of very big proportions and of extended periods, probably never seen before, one would have thought that the amount of money being printed into the economies would have bred inflation, but instead it's having the opposite in inflation results. Actually, some economies are experiencing deflation, etc. So one cannot say for sure that the direction the currency will take through the rest of the year, what form it takes. Potentially, you see with the increase in interest rates we just experienced in the country and in other areas as well. I mean, like Turkey, for example, last year they increased their interest rates by 200 basis points overnight. Big surprise. But I think you're starting once again to create that space which attracted capital into some emerging markets, which is high-yielding assets, and I think that's what potentially could result in some money coming back into emerging markets, because the growth in developed economies continue to be subdued, and they've got deflation in those spaces. I think once everyone comes down and they start to regurgitate all the information and the growth dynamics they're seeing in emerging markets, when they appreciate that China, even if it's growing 6.9%, even if it were to grow at 6%, you will still be achieving definitely some decent growth in that area. I do think we could see some capital come back to major markets, and potentially the rand firms up from here. So we're just hoping for no more own goals, though.
I was interested, I was in Davos, and the Japanese central bank governor, the equivalent of Lesetja Kganyago, was saying that he thinks it's a good thing for emerging markets, this divergence in monetary policy. At least we don't have everybody in the world hiking rates at the same time. We have have some going up, some going down. But let's talk about that after the break. We have to take a quick break. Do stay with us. Lots more to discuss after a 50 basis point increase in our interest rates today. The rand definitely firming 16 rand 25 against the dollar at the moment. More after this.